Boxing King Media in association with Box Raw. Dominic Ingle, it's fight week and there's also been loads of drama, so I thought it's a perfect time to get Dominic Ingle's opinions because people love to hear what you've got to say, Dom. How are you, first of all?
Sorry? How old am I? I thought you said, how old am I? No. I thought
You could tell us how old you are.
That's a strange question to ask me to start off interview. I'll be 57 in September, believe it or not. In fact, no, 56. Can't quite believe it myself.
57 in September and 56 in September, but still looking like a 40-odd-year-old.
Well, you know what? Probably I'm probably where I was when I was in my 30s, to be honest, fitness-wise and shape-wise. Age is just a number if you keep on top of it. Live your life properly. You don't tend to physically age that much. There might be some mental decline. I think I've had a couple of shots around the head I shouldn't have took, but yeah, apart from that, all good.
Yep, and the secret is Dominic's nutrition diets, as we always say. You know, if anyone wants to look like Dom at 57, hit him up on Instagram.
But with a bit more hair, probably. You want to be bald, would you, at 57, if you've got a good head of hair? But it's never done me any harm, to be honest. I get compared to... who would I get compared to now? I've had a few of late. Not particularly complimentary, actually. I think somebody actually turned around and said I look like a 300-year-old Ninja Turtle, which I thought were quite funny. And another one, I'll tell you who it was. It was Michael Keaton. Remember who played Batman? And he was always struggling with his hairline even back then, but he's completely bald now, and somebody actually likened me to him. But I prefer the Bruce Willis, Vin Diesel, and sometimes Ross Kemp. Now that's kind of the way I like to go. And worst case scenario, Telly Savalas from Kojak.
Ross Kemp's definitely a good comparison. So yesterday, Dom, I know you watched the press conference. We saw some crazy drama at the presser. John Fury's all over the news. He flipped tables over, did a Chisora, but probably did it worse and better in some contexts. What did you make of it? You was watching the press conference. What did you think of it and how it unfolded?
He's a few years older than me, John. I think he's about 2 or 3 years older, and he's one of those down-to-earth fellas and old school. And I can remember in the late 80s into the 90s when he was boxing, and my dad always saying, you know, if you only train properly, this fella, he'd be beating everybody, and he'd just kind of look like he just jumped in the ring and have a street fight, and he'd win and he'd lose some. But he's no nonsense, innit? And looking at that press conference yesterday, you know, they're obviously trying to hype it up for the social media and do their thing, but John's proper old school, and I can imagine it was annoying because he's just wanting to get on with the business, and they're talking about everything else, what doesn't really matter. And interestingly enough, I've seen KSI when he fought Logan Paul. It was a good fight, actually, but looking at that fight and looking at John Fury, you know, in his day, John Fury would have beat, you know, Jake Paul, Logan Paul, KSI. He'd have beat all of them. Probably without even breaking a sweat. So you can probably imagine his frustration looking at these guys making millions from boxing, and he had to do it the hard way, and you know, bring Tyson through the hard way as well, really.
What did you think? Because I think you touched on it there. Because I think there was a bit where they were talking. I think Logan Paul and his opponent were cursing each other about, you know, girlfriends and throwing cakes at each other and stuff like that. And then John kind of warned them in that moment and told them to stick to business. And then they didn't listen. No,
and he, like I say, you can imagine his frustration. He probably thought, well, F this, just chuck table over and kind of, you know, cause chaos. You know, if you're going to cause chaos, well, cause it properly. Then he probably thought, well, you know, I've had enough of this. Sat here like a spare part, listening to this rubbish. Because, you know, he's still thinking it's all about fighting. It is all about fighting. But, you know, in that arena where they're operating and where Tommy's made a good deal of money out of it, you've got to have that element of pantomime with it, and that's what the Pauls are doing, and KSI and that whole team of misfits. It's going out to a broader audience, and you know, John's still trying to play by the straight rules and the boxing rules, and it's a whole different arena altogether. So you know, you probably see him boiling. You could see him boiling up, and he just flipped, didn't he, and exploded. But it's great for numbers, and he probably didn't even really do it purposely as well.
what did you think of it? Because obviously the online, there's a lot of people obviously slating him, saying, you know, it was over the top and it's not boxing, etc. But obviously over the years we've seen Mike Tyson bite Lennox Lewis's leg. We've seen people get punched at weigh-ins, you know, Morales Barrera. We've seen a lot of crazy stuff. So where did you kind of rank it with regards to all that?
It's not on the same level. I mean, John's not acting because he's you know, I've known him a long time. I've spoken to him lots of times, been down to this gym with Tyson over the years, and he's a calm fella. But he's one of those, you know, he's obviously been in prison for certain things and fighting, and he flips. And I think he's one of those type of guys who keeps a lid on it, keeps a lid on it, keeps a lid on it. He's very respectful. But when somebody crosses a line, he just explodes, and you find that with a lot of people. You know, Mike Tyson's an example. I've never seen Tyson Fury do it, but there's lots of people like that who flip. It just builds up. So, you know, I think it was genuine what he did, and it was probably out of frustration. And I don't think he'd be too bothered what people are thinking about him online. He'll generate numbers, and, you know, he'll go off and do his own thing. He's always been that type of person.
Interesting stuff, and we'll probably speak about it closer to the fight. But, you know, who would you make an early favourite in this fight? Tommy Fury appears to have a huge size difference on KSI. He's naturally the bigger man, but he's coming down to 183 pounds with no rehydration clause.
I think, you know, like I said before, I saw KSI against Jake Paul. I think it might have been the first fight they both had, or maybe the second, whatever. But it was an interesting fight because it was on the undercard of Billy Joe Saunders. Well, it wasn't actually on the undercard. They were the top of the bill, and Billy Joe Saunders was on the undercard in LA, which is a bit of a weird scenario. But to say they were novices, it was a great fight. They were vicious. They were slinging bombs in, and sometimes when you look at that, you know, it can be misread in the sense that they probably give Tommy a decent fight. But if you look at Tommy against Jake Paul, what he basically did is just kept it nice and calm and straight and just stuck to very, very basic stuff. And that's where he's going to have the advantage. You know, it's a good fight to have. It's a good fight to have for Tommy because he's making another load of money. And as limited as I think Tommy is, he's still got enough basic knowledge on how to outmaneuver the likes of Jake Paul and KSI. So, you know, expect probably another win on points. Possibly could be a stoppage with Tommy. Now he's found the level of these fighters. He knows what to expect. So, you know, it'll be an interesting fight, and, you know, fair play to Tommy for, you know, picking a fight what's going to make him a fortune.
Interesting. Should be a good build-up fight week. And moving on, Dom, this Saturday we've got a huge heavyweight fight, Usyk Dubois. There's obviously a keen interest on the undercard as well, but I'm going to speak to you about Usyk Dubois first. Well, I'll phrase it like this. How does Daniel Dubois beat Usyk, and do you think he has any chance in beating Usyk? Because a lot of people are writing him off.
Does he have a chance? I don't think, you know, I've not looked and thought, how is Dubois going to beat Usyk? It's not. I looked at Dubois. I think he's done exceptionally well. I think, but when he came up against Joyce, it was very, very basic, and he's solid. And he got caught with that eye injury. I just think that's about Dubois' level and the highest he's ever going to achieve. And I think in this fight, you're looking at somebody like Usyk, who's boxed Joe Joyce and outboxed him in the amateurs, I believe. I don't see Dubois making a dent on Usyk. He'll be too good on his feet. He'll be too fast. He'll outthink him, outmaneuver him. And I just think the accumulation of shots, what Usyk's going to throw on him, is going to revisit that eye injury that he got with Joyce. I think that's what's going to happen. So I think he could probably take Usyk's shots, but I think the accumulation of shots is going to be what's going to be the telling bit of this fight. And I think it's going to be a stoppage after the 6, eye damage or taking too many shots. I think that's how it's going to be, this fight. I don't see Dubois changing from Shane McGuigan to his new trainer, to Don. I just don't think, you know, Don's old school. He's an older fella. He had a lot of success with Chisora. But I think with people like Dubois, you've got to have a lot of time with them to know how they tick, because he has been carefully matched all the way through. And, you know, Shane McGuigan's a young trainer, and he'll acknowledge these things. He'll get to understand the person. He's had obviously high-level fighters like Josh Taylor and Akole. So, being successful as a trainer is also understanding the fighter. And I'll even admit myself, being an older person and Don, even though I do take it into consideration, you do have a certain way, and the older you get, you realise you've got to stick to that way to be effective. But when you're a bit younger, you will bend a little bit to these fighters. I used to do that when I was younger, when I was under Brendan training people. I had to obviously follow the plan. I had to follow what Brendan said, and sometimes I'd be under my breath, kind of cursing the method and thinking, we need to do it a different way. But I stuck to the plan, and you tend to get dragged in a little bit with fighters and bend a little bit, and you get to know them and what makes them tick. And I think, Shane had a good understanding of Dubois. I thought he did very well under Dubois, and didn't think it was a very good move when he left Shane McGuigan. And I just don't think. I think Don is a bit long in the tooth, which is, I am. I'm not going to say that there's anything wrong with that. And he's got a certain way, and I just don't think he's been around. I don't think they've been around each other enough to realise, what makes each other tick, and that it's going to be a successful partnership. So, it's and coming up and changing, especially before a big fight, like that. They've not had chance to see how it all works. And I know I said in previous interviews with people like Anthony Joshua, saying you don't need time, with a new trainer. Realistically, when you're the level of Anthony Joshua, you don't. Your level of Billy Joe Saunders, you don't. Your level of Kell Brook, you particularly don't. You should be knowing about there. But Dubois for me has never really shown a level of independence to kind of make his own choices. He doesn't seem like I might be wrong, but he doesn't seem like a fighter to me who makes his own choices. He seems to be somebody's making the choices for him, whether it's a promoter or the trainer or somebody else. So in many ways, he reminds me of how Scott Quigg was with Joe Gallagher. I don't think he's got a good boxing brain, to be honest, but that's just from me looking from the outside. I've never really paid a lot of attention to Daniel Dubois. I think he's quite robotic in what he's done, and I think power has been his main trait and his best trait. And once somebody starts giving him problems to solve, he's not a very good problem solver, as we saw with Joyce, who was very, very straight up and down. You knew exactly what you were expecting, straightforward, big shots, walking through them. The way to beat somebody like Joyce, when it's that, you're faced with that problem, is to outbox them. Is to just jab and move. Don't matter if you've got power or not. Mobility is what's going to beat the fighters like Joyce. Wear them down into the later rounds and then use the power. But it was almost, kind of a punch up from the onset with that fight, and that's not the way. Because if you put them both together, Joyce and Dubois, it's always going to be Joyce. He's built like a brick S-house, isn't he? That's what he is. He's solid. And I think the wear and tear on Joyce over the years is what cost him the fight against, was it Zhang? Is that what they call him? Getting shots in the face. He was taking those shots all day long in previous fights, but the accumulation of getting punched that area repeatedly obviously cost him the fight. So, Dubois has got to, if anything, he's got to be fast on his feet against Usyk, and he's got to have a boxing plan, and I don't think he's got a good boxing plan. I don't think he's got the ability to be a good on your feet boxer. I think he's going to be coming forward and trying to do what he normally does.
So you're going for a points decision?
I think Usyk's probably going to beat him on injury after 6 or 7. I think that eye's going to catch him out. I think he's going to have a problem with that eye again.
Interesting stuff. On the undercard, Dom, a bit of a historical and significant to the Ingle gym as well. We've got the son of Prince Naseem HAMED, Aadam HAMED, who spent some time in this gym a year and a bit ago, making his professional debut. A lot of people have been waiting for this debut announcement, and it's come out the blue, and what a stage to do it on. One of the things I want to first want to ask you is big ballsy move undercard or Chiefs co-main event actually on USYK Dubois in front of 40-odd thousand. That's a lot of pressure in it, as well as being the son of Prince Naseem HAMED.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Naz has got a lot of pull ante to get him into that position of chief support on a fighter who's never had a fight, and he's got no credibility whatsoever. He's not earned that position. It's obviously a business move and a negotiation by Naz because he's got that kind of pull.
But don't you think though, like it's going to attract a lot of eyes just based on who son he is?
Yeah, of course it's going to, why wouldn't it? But, sometimes that's not a good thing. It could be a lot of pressure on him. So obviously they'll get an opponent, what I kind of say, got no arms and legs, and he's got to be guaranteed to win. Naz is not stupid. He's not going to expose his son to the world against a really live opponent. He's in his first fight. Even Naz didn't do that. Naz got fed a diet of journeymen for the first 4 or 5 fights, which is what you do. But seasoned journeymen who would give anybody a fight, and that's what you do. That's how you cut your teeth. That's how you learn. So he's not going to be fighting anybody of any danger. But it'll be interesting to see how he reacts under pressure, on a big bill, his first professional fight, everybody having high expectations of him. So it's good from that aspect. And I've had him in this gym, and do you know what? I can't remember. It was, I think, more than a year, more than that. It could be 2 or 3 years ago. It was around COVID. And he came in here with his brother Sammy, and they trained, and they did really well. They sparred out. In fact, I've got a clip, and I'll let you have it. You'll be able to put it on for the viewers, of him sparring Liam Williams, which was interesting. Yeah, that'll be good. But he can fight. Aadam can fight. But for me, it's you can't go from riches to rags. And Naz came from rags to riches. He had a motive and a motivation why he wanted to become a world champion. He came from up the road, family of 9 kids, fighting for attention. He got attention down here. And Brendan sold him this big dream. He was going to be a massive world champion, make 40 million, win titles at numerous weights, and be, clear up the division, which he did. He cleared up the division. He never went through the weights, which he probably should have done. And he made a fortune, and that's an incentive. And I don't see the incentive for Aadam, to be honest. I think
I asked him that very point. I kind of reworded it into, training in silk pajamas, and I said, a lot of people are going to be thinking this about you. How are you going to counteract that? And to be fair, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he basically said, just wait, just give me time, and I'll show it. And he's been living in Birmingham. I've seen, I don't know if you've seen it, but he's been living above the gym in a little shack. He's been there for the last, I think, 6 months or so.
Well, you know what? That's a different scenario when you're living in a shack above a gym with no money in your pocket. And absolutely nothing, and you're scrimping and saving, and you're eating pot noodles, and you're living out of a 1-bedroom what's on yourself, and you want to get out of that situation, but that's not what the situation he's in. I could live in this gym if I got a dad like Naz who finances you, because they don't want for anything. I don't think he spoils them in the sense where he hands out piles of cash. But when they turned up here, they were driving a nice car and they were in nice accommodation in Sheffield. So there's got to be incentive, and there is no incentive. The incentive actually is he's never going to live up to what his dad was. That's impossible, because very few people do. You don't see him boxing. I think.
I'm going to interrupt you there for a second. I just thought of this. Do you think, obviously you're a lot older than Aadam, but you could probably share the same sort of experience with him, because your dad's Brendan Ingle, one of the all-time great trainers. Do you feel like the expectation of that was probably on your shoulders as well, and he might have a similar sort of expectation?
No, because if I'm honest, I never wanted to get involved in boxing. I boxed as an amateur. I never wanted to be a trainer. I wanted to be the main player. I wanted to be, when I was at school, I was good at sports, all kinds of sports, football, boxing. I didn't want to be a trainer. I wanted to be the number one. But I realised pretty early on what it was going to take to get to that level. And I didn't have enough of a screw loose to attain that, and it wasn't my main ambition to be, you know, the best fighter in the world. I was around training in the year of Errol Graham, and he was exceptional, and I thought, that's how good you've got to be, and I wasn't that good. But as time goes on, I think I've told this story 1,000 times, Johnny Nelson walked in the gym at the same age, 14, and he was absolutely useless. And I used to spar him, body spar him, and he was scared of his own shadow. But he had a bigger incentive than me because he had a lot more to prove. He got bullied, he came from a deprived background. He had a reason to elevate himself, where I lived across from the gym, we were doing all right. My dad had a job, there were 5 of us, we didn't have a lot of money, but I was in a 10 times better situation than Johnny. So he had a reason to climb out of the situation he was. So, you know, Adam's not really got that. And my expectations of being a trainer, I never wanted to be a boxing trainer. I got it by default. So I know I'm not as good a trainer as my dad. I can only do as good as I can do. And I've not done a bad job, but I spent a lot of time, a lot of years under him from the ages of 18. I never really became a full-time trainer till I was 27. I probably never went in the corner with anybody on myself until I was 30.
He said something very similar to me, actually, because he said, like, he was almost kind of sick of people constantly bringing his dad up, and he said, I just want to show people what Aadam HAMED's about. I don't want to be constantly labelled as Nazi's son. He goes, I know that's going to come with the territory, but ultimately I want people to recognise me for what I am, and it's going to be my path. It's not going to be like Naseem Hamed's path.
Well,
because he said there's only one Naz.
Well, you've drawn that comparison. Well, we're not the same, because I never wanted to show the world who Dominic Ingle was as a trainer. Honestly, I never did. I didn't want to think, oh, I'm going to like be better than my dad, or I've got my own style. I never wanted to do that. I did this job purely as part of the family business, because how the situation was. Brendan and John kind of took a bit of a back step when Naz left. We still worked with people they still worked on Johnny Nelson Jr. with those type of kids, but you know, I think they'd done it for so long, they hadn't got as much ambition as me, whereas I was prepared to come and do the donkey work, train the kids, get them on a diet. You know, once I set my mind to doing a project, I wanted it to work 100%. And John went more into the management. Brendan kind of overlooked everything. So I never really wanted to make a name for myself as a trainer. That's the top and bottom of it.
So I think the biggest comparison he's probably going to get is probably not his dad. It's going to be the other fighters' sons, like Campbell Hatton, Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr. So based on what you've seen, I know it's quite early to predict, but you've seen glimpses of him here. But I saw him last week, and he looks like I said to him, I see he looks like a proper athlete now. Before, he looked like somebody who's trying to learn, etc. But he's all chiseled up. It looks like he's ready to fight. So based on what you've seen, Dom, and just comparing him to Campbell, Conor, Eubank Jr., because that's what I think he'll get compared to. But how do you think he'll do compared to them three?
I think he'll do. You look at Campbell Hatton, you look at all these fighters' sons. Even Steve Collins had a son who boxed, Steve Collins Jr. None of them ever lived up to what the parents were or the dads were. I think the only fighter, and there might be more, but what just springs to mind, the only fighter who superseded his relatives and his dad is who?
Tyson Fury?
No. Well, yeah, you could say Tyson Fury, but I'm thinking big. Well, is it bigger than him? It's Floyd Mayweather. His dad was a good fighter. His uncles were good fighters, but he superseded everybody. He's won weights at titles at different divisions. We don't need to talk about that, but everybody else hasn't, and it's going to be the same for Aadam. They're going to operate at a much lower level, just like Hatton, just like Ben, just like Eubank. They're never going to be anywhere near. And look at Chavez Jr. Nowhere the level of his father. So I think he'll do all right because he'll get matched carefully. And he'll do all right. But if you ask me honest opinion, is Conor Benn good enough to win a British title? No. Is Campbell Hatton? No. Chris Eubank Jr. did. Would Aadam HAMED win a British title? Probably not. But that doesn't mean he's not going to win fights, because he will be carefully matched. And only time will tell. He's got the name, he's got the looks, he's got the moves. But everything changes when you get punched in the face, but it's whether they're going to allow him to fight anybody who's going to actually be a live opponent. That's, you know, these days, we've got box rake, and you can look who they're fighting. Now, when Nas boxed, Nas had a lot of dummies early in his career. That's a fact, but nobody knew because you couldn't look it online. But when
that's everybody, though, isn't it? Realistically speaking, everyone.
Yeah, it is. But what I'm saying to you is, but if the fans had 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the fans had no idea. You look at some kid from Argentina who were 25-0. You couldn't really check through his record. But when the crunch point came, when Nas, don't forget, Nas went from super bantam and jumped straight up to featherweight to box Steve Robinson in a world title fight. He'd never even boxed at featherweight. So look at how Frank Warren manoeuvred that. And Steve Collins, the Cinderella man, was, you know, at the peak part of his career, was beating everybody who was in tremendous shape. And nobody actually expected Nas to win. But look what he did to him. So when Nas actually had to step up to the plate, he did. He had to have a fight. And the rest is history. I just don't think that's ever going to happen with Campbell Hatton. It's not going to happen with Aadam HAMED. But that's just me being honest, you know. Hopefully, you know, he proves me wrong and I see something different. But I just think at the age he's at, I think, what is he, 22, 23? 20. You've got to be, you know, you've got to be doing this from being a kid. Nas 7, Kell Brook 10. You know, Liam Williams will have been 10 or 11. Billy Joe Saunders will have been 10 or 11.
Yeah, Audley Harrison started really late.
Yeah, but look at what? Look at Audley Harrison. You know what I mean? It's like, so what? Audley Harrison won the Olympics. Yeah, he won the Olympics, and then what? He never did anything as a, you know what I mean? Never lived up to the hype, did he?
But will you be cheering him on? Will he be supported? Because you've got a big family connection, Ingle. Because everyone recognise HAMED, Ingle, and Ingle HAMED. Everyone just puts the names together.
Yeah, of course I'll be cheering him on, and I hope he does the best. But in this day and age, what we've got, what we didn't have back 20 years ago, is we've got the internet side of boxing, the Jake Pauls, you know, Tommy Fury crossing over and boxing YouTubers and whatever. There's massive opportunities to make money, and boxing is a fan-based sport, and if there's a market out there to make a fortune and people want to see it, to pay it, well, fair enough, it doesn't matter. It's entertainment. You know, it's not for the boxing purists, I would imagine. But you know, Aadam HAMED, I'll have a couple of fights. He might end up fighting some YouTuber or somebody else. Who knows how it is these days, because it's all changed. And for me to look back and say, oh, it shouldn't be like that. It should be like it were 10 years ago. Well, that's not how progress is. You know, if there's an opportunity to make money for as much as you can, you know, in entertainment, then do it. If that's what you've got to do it if you're going to make money. And he's got the name, he's got the platform. His dad's clued up enough to push him in the right direction and to maximise his earning potential. And I think with Nas, I have to laugh with Nas, because I can imagine thinking, if I can get Adam to earn a fortune, it means I don't have to pay him any money or look after him myself, because Nas is tight. Do you know what I mean? He's a proper Yorkshireman. So if he can move Adam off somewhere where he's self-financing, even better. You know, he won't be spending into his dad's fortune.
I think it'll be intriguing to watch, and I think most importantly, it'll be interesting to get your opinion after we see him fight. Because even if his opponent isn't good or whatever, like you said, that is how boxing works. Your first 5-10 fights are always matched opponents, but we can look at his technique, and if he wins by a knockout, how the knockout came. So it'll be interesting to get your opinion on how he actually looks in the ring. Do you reckon that will obviously give us a bit of an idea?
Not really. I think what I will say the biggest takeaway from this is from somebody who's never had a fight in his life. You know, when you're a kid and you're 10, 11 years old fighting an amateur, it's all slap and tickle, really. And, you know, over the years you get used to it, and it's a gradual progression. But when you're 20 odd and you're more aware of what can actually happen, when you're a kid, you're not aware what can happen in a ring. And you're not really getting hit hard enough to be bothered. It's just like having a scrap at school. I can remember boxing as an amateur. And then getting a bit older, it's totally different. So you're more aware you know, of what happens. And he's in his 20s, so he knows, you know, from his dad boxing, seeing people getting knocked out, he knows the risks, the benefits. The biggest takeaway from this is, at his age, stepping into the ring, you know, in front of how many thousands of people are going to be there? What's it hold, that arena? What's it hold?
44,000.
44,000. It's daunting, because even if you had to step into that ring, say you was just stepping onto the stage to do a talk, anybody would lose the nerve. So just him getting into the ring.
Surely he deserves a lot of credit, because I said this to him the other day. I said, ultimately, you've said yes. You made the decision to say, right, I'll fight in the USYK undercard, I'll be co-main event, debut on 40,000 seat arena. You're Naz's son. Everyone's going to be watching you because you're Naz's son, expecting Naseem Hamed version 2. But you've obviously said clearly don't expect that. This is Aadam Hamed. But you put all that pressure on himself. Surely for a young lad, he must deserve some credit.
That's what the biggest takeaway is. Getting in as his cornerman, getting in as the referee, getting in as the ring announcer is going to be a daunting task. Do you understand? You know, even the more seasoned ring announcer is going to be on edge. It's not, oh, this is a walk. It's not. It's never a walk in the park, walk into an arena with that many people, and you're the main centre of attention. The nerves you can totally lose the plot. So from going from absolute never having that experience, never boxing as an amateur in working men's clubs in front of 200 people, that's nervous. You know, Kell Brook, when he first boxed, and Kell said this himself, when Kell Brook had his first amateur fight, he walked to the ring and he turned around and walked back because of all the fans and his family and expectation. Did it 2 or 3 times because there was that much pressure on him. But look where he turned out to be. That was at 11 years old. So he got used to it then. But Adam's never had that. He's never had that build-up. So he's going to get in that ring, and as much as he thinks he's going to be able to handle how he feels, he will have never experienced that before. Do you understand? He will have never experienced it. And that can change a lot. So you've got to give him credit from going from 0 to 1,000%. And, you know, everything he knows could go out the window. But that's a big achievement in itself.
Definitely so. I think, like I said, we touched on it there. I think he deserves immense credit for putting himself under that pressure, and it's down to him to shine now, and hopefully he does.
And interestingly enough, you got Sammy, and you got Adam, and you've got his younger one. And the first thing I noticed about Adam and Sammy when they came here, it's like Naz had been split in half. You got the boxing side of him, and you got the fighting side of him, and Adam was a boxing skill side of him, and Sammy was the aggressive puncher side of him. And if you could have moulded them two together, you'd have probably got a Naz. But it's almost, that's the first thing I noticed, and I just thought, and then I said to my brother John, obviously who trained Naz, and he said the same thing. He went, you know, if you stuck them two together, you'd have a Naz. I said, yeah. I said, but unfortunately, or fortunately enough, they've both developed a different side of his fighting style. So that's interesting, and you know, Adam needs to adapt to the more aggressive, volatile side of Naz because he's got the skill set, and Sammy was brute force and pressure and strength and very rough around the edges. But obviously Naz never forced him into boxing from an early age to kind of mould him. He kind of let him do what they wanted to do. I think Adam started off in tennis, so he kind of put him into the rich sports, tennis, and maybe he should have chucked one of them into motor racing, I don't know. But that's the young ages when you start to mould him. But it's going to be, he's got a few years, and if he's matched right, you know, over time he will develop. So, you know, only time will tell. And it'll be interesting on Saturday, and, you know, hopefully he comes through, and I think he will. And they'll do all right.
Definitely so. Wish him all the best. Dom, it should be interesting. I appreciate your time.